What's up, guys? Iván Carranza here, and welcome to Coffee with Iván. For today's episode, I had the honor to talk to the one and only Matthew Denis. Matthew is a bass player from Los Angeles, California, and he also does voice acting. He plays bass for artists and bands such as Diamante and Zodiac, as well as doing session recording work for a bunch of other musicians as well. I first became aware of Matt's work through Instagram, mainly because he has an ability to dial in crushing distorted bass tones, and also because he plays similar brands of products to the ones that I use. He also plays Dingwall basses, Darkless pedals, Tech 21 pedals, and he also really likes P basses. So we connected and we've been chatting for, I think, over 1.5 years, and it was great finally being to really talk to him, even though it would have been cooler to talk to him face to face. You know, the internet makes it possible to connect people living on 2 different continents. So that was a great thing. In this episode, we talked about Matt's influences on the bass and how he actually started doing mixing engineering at the beginning. We also talked about how to audition for a band, how to prepare, his approach to writing bassline and recording music for other people, as well as working out and other topics. You can find more about Matt's work on Instagram and Facebook, both at Matthew the Bass Player, and also his voiceover acting page on Instagram at the Voiceover Viking. I hope you like this episode, and I'll see you guys in a bit.
The college that I went to did not have a great music program, but they did have a really, really good party school. So I mostly just didn't go to class and spent my time in my dorm teaching myself how to play bass. I bought myself a bass and started learning the bass lines from like all of my old favorite punk records. I'm a huge fan of the Descendants. Carl Alvarez is a just amazing melodic bass player. Like that's the kind of stuff that got me into playing bass initially. So yeah, smoked a ton of weed, taught myself how to play bass for a year while being enrolled in college. And then just happened to move into a big party house off campus with another guy from Northern California who was down, this was down in San Diego, who was down there just working and saving money to go to a place called MI, Musicians Institute in Hollywood. So that's sort of what changed my trajectory from wanting to be a recording engineer to actually wanting to be a session musician, a professional bass player. So it's interesting because in hindsight, it would have been great for me for my career, for my creative output over the last decade if I'd focused on both things simultaneously. Because at that point, that was 2006 to 2007 or 2008 is when I was at MI, and they also did full courses in how to use Logic and that kind of stuff. And the people who really did delve into that are all people who have pretty big names and are doing big things now, like Misha from Periphery. At that point, he was just some dude who knew how to use Logic and was on a guitar nerd forum posting his guitar nerd, chuggy, shreddy stuff for people to listen to. And eventually enough people liked it that he put together a band, and the rest. So in a lot of ways, I feel like I've been playing catch up for the last couple of years in particular to get my engineering and mixing skills close to my actual performance skills. So yeah, it would have been great if I kind of remembered like, oh yeah, I wanted to make records too, and actually learned how to do that. But I got so I'd even call it obsessed with just learning everything there was about bass and different techniques and styles, and that was one of the cool things about school. It kind of forced you to play for 8 hours every day, 10 hours every day. So the amount that you progressed. You just progress so rapidly in terms of your skills as a player. And honestly, in some ways, I was actually not a better musician, but like I was technically probably a better bass player when I left school than I am now.
I know what you mean.
Right? Because I mean, there's some things that, like, at least in my particular career as a professional player, I just haven't had to use some of those skills, so they've definitely degraded a bit. Like, I could read music pretty solidly when I left. Sight reading was not really a problem for me. I can still read charts just fine because that's something that I do very frequently. But to actually sight read a complicated piece of music, no, I'd bomb hard now because I just don't really do that anymore. And other stuff like all of the crazy two-handed tapping and slap chops that I used to be super into. No one ever hires you to play that stuff ever, and it just doesn't happen unless, like, that's what you do in your own band. No one wants to do that. So yeah, actually just last week or the week before, I came across an old piece of music that I wrote when I was on vacation. It's it's a two-handed tapping thing that uses delay and reverb and sounds like being on vacation on an island. I was like, oh man, yeah, I should definitely record that properly. And I went back to learn. I was like, oh shit, I suck at this now. Okay, cool, new challenge.
So to backtrack just a little bit, did you like completely left all the audio engineering things when you started, like when you got into music school?
Yeah,
was it just
pretty much totally. Like I wasn't studying any of that at all. The only thing I really learned how to do during that same time period in the audio engineering realm was drum programming, just to write music with. One of my good friends and roommates at the time, I was in a band with at school, and like we won one of their songwriting competitions, so we were writing music together all the time. And he knew more about that stuff than I did. He was already into Cubase, and I basically kind of like just looked over his shoulder for a while to figure out how to program drums. And MIDI programming in Cubase is super easy. I still actually do all of my MIDI in Cubase for the same reason. I've heard that Pro Tools MIDI is better now, but for a long time it was just like I'd prefer to light myself on fire, actually. So yeah, I mean, that's why I was saying it would have been better for my creative output, and honestly probably my employability overall, because currently I'm doing a decent amount of work as a mix engineer, but since that's not really what I've focused on at all, or even primarily for the last 10 years, definitely the last 10 years, but even the last 5, it hasn't been my primary focus. So I don't have that network of people that know me for doing that skill. So I'm still working on building up that aspect of, like, my brand, basically. So people know to call me if they need a record mixed. So.
When you were like programming drums, did you play drums yourself, or was it just from listening, experimenting? Okay, what's that?
I mean, I kind of always had a good musical understanding of what the drummer like physically could be doing. Like I would never program something that required 3 hands because it would intrinsically make sense to me. Like, oh yeah, so obviously you can't hit 2 crashes at the same time he's hitting the tom or the snare. I can't do that. I feel like since the bass and the drums are so interrelated, especially in the styles of music that I really enjoyed playing and writing primarily at the time, like punk rock and rock music, like those are like kind of the same thing. They're just 2 parts of the same machine. Whereas like, funk, they're kind of doing really different things. But if that's why bands like Rage Against the Machine make people jump up and down and go so crazy, because the kick and the bass are hitting at the same time all the time, and that makes people go nuts. So
interesting. And how is it that like you got like you mentioned, like obsessed with playing bass, like going from just recording other people to spending hours and hours picking up bass?
Yeah, I mean, I was always inspired by listening to that stuff, and as soon as I figured out that I could learn how to do it too, that was kind of like the switch. And I honestly, I couldn't tell you what like the first song was that did that for me on bass, but it would have been something by the Descendants or Rancid or maybe Rise Against, something like that. But I was really into punk rock at the time. I still am, still love it. The record that the Descendants released a couple of years ago is actually great. If you've never heard it, super good.
No, I haven't. I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, especially for some older dudes, they've just got it still, like on fire. Those guys, crazy. But yeah, I mean, as soon as I figured out that I could figure out what they were doing and how cool it was, and how like cool, it doesn't even cover it. It was like the cornerstone part of that particular sound. Because I mean, in those styles, the bass is almost like the lead guitar. The guitars are just playing power chords, almost not any lead or melodic material at all. And sometimes the singer is not particularly melodious. Like most of the melody is being carried by the bass entirely. So yeah, hearing how creative you could be with those aspects of that instrument just got me on fire. And I part of it, I think, is just an intrinsic part of my own personality. I think I have a bit of an obsessive personality. Like if I discover something that I like, I really like it for a bit. So
yeah,
that's good. As long as I can stay focused, you know, once I realized that I was out of shape and kind of skinny fat, that made me go to the gym pretty consistently, pretty aggressively for a while. So that's good.
Yeah.
As long as I can keep that work-life balance, it seems to work out all right. Yeah, I just had to back off the weed consumption pretty considerably, because it was pretty crazy there in college, I'll tell you. But honestly, if I even tried to do that now, with how much stronger it's gotten since then, I'd send myself to the hospital. Like looking back on the amount that I used to smoke, I don't even do that at all anymore. We use CBD here all the time. I don't know if you guys have that in Germany, if it's a big...
No, it's illegal.
CBD is still illegal?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's crazy.
I think everything, wheat related, at least over here in the Netherlands, that's pretty open.
Right.
But in Germany, as far as I know, it's illegal. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess that makes sense. I mean, CBD only became federally legal here in the US a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago. So it's kind of been a trip, because like now you can go to a standalone CBD store in Texas and get CBD, which for anyone who doesn't know, it doesn't get you high at all. It's like anti-inflammatory, anti-anxiety medicine, essentially, is what it does. It's just like it's like a oil, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been, I mean, the whole music industry has changed so much in just the last 10 years. Every single aspect of it has changed. It's crazy, man, to see the local music scene here in LA has changed. Like, it used to be this huge interconnected club scene. Like the Sunset Strip was a giant thing that had 6 venues, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It has 1 now. 2, I guess.
Wow.
It has 2. The Whiskey and the Viper Room are still left, but the Key Club's gone, the House of Blues is gone, the Knitting Factory's gone, the Cat Club's gone.
Because they went out of business, or like no bands, or what's the reason? What do you think?
They changed ownership for whatever reason. The House of Blues got torn down and is being turned into luxury condos, which is pretty crazy. I mean, that whole dynamic with the gentrification of the LA area is interesting to me, because the reason that people used to come to Hollywood to visit was there was a bunch of stuff to do. Like, some of the best music in the world was being played. Like, you could see the Doors play at the Whiskey, Guns N' Roses, like when they were still new, fresh bands that, and again, this is before the internet existed, so you couldn't like see them elsewhere. You actually had to go to a place in person and watch it with your own eyes. And yeah, great comedy and all kinds of stuff. That's why people would come and and visit or want to live in LA. So if you take away a lot of that stuff, me personally, I'm not sure why you'd want to move into a condo right on Sunset Boulevard where there's a ton of traffic and the rent is astronomically high and there's not really anything to do aside from eat at restaurants.
Yeah.
So it's weird. But yeah, the Key Club is now it's like a hip hop club called One Oak, I think. The Cat Club is an Irish bar. I don't remember what happened to the Knitting Factory. But yeah, I mean, so much about the local scene has changed. Just like DAWs and digital music production has changed and basically allowed anyone to learn how to make a professional sounding record with just a laptop in their own house. And you could not do that 10, 15, 20 years ago. It was literally impossible.
Yeah.
So
no chance.
Yeah.
So for the gigs that, I mean, of course, right now, if anyone's listening in the future as well, right now it's 2020, September.
Future as well. Yeah.
This is we're in the middle of a pandemic, so there are no shows happening. So when you did used to play like show, were they mostly out of town? I would imagine, right? Like somewhere else, or cities or states.
I mean, well,
Because
it was a bit of both. Like I've been touring professionally since right around the time that I left school, so since about 2008. But for a long time, a lot of what my career consisted of in LA was doing rehearsals and local gigs with local bands. So literally every single night of the week, I would be out either rehearsing with a band, sometimes more than one, or out gigging with a band, also sometimes more than one. I had a couple of nights where I had 2 or 3 gigs in a row. Like I'd play at 8 o'clock somewhere and drive across town and play at 10 o'clock somewhere else. And that just doesn't happen anymore. So that's one of the things that's been interesting and challenging for me working in the industry to deal with, because it eventually created a really slow period of work for me where it looked like, in 2018, it looked like my music career was done. And just because of the dynamic of how it works, like, so at least for me, what kept getting me hired is that I was playing out so much that other people would see me and those people would end up hiring me for something. So it was just sort of like this self-perpetuating circle, because eventually a project that I worked with would get less busy or stop working entirely for whatever reason. Bands break up all the time. People move out of state, get pregnant, whatever. But since other people were constantly there was never a shortage of work for me. I was always pretty busy. And then as the scene started to change, the Sunset Strip became less of a vibrant music scene. Things kind of spread out more across LA. Like there's still plenty of clubs and places to play in LA, don't get me wrong, but there isn't any like centralized connected scene where like the bands all know each other and the shows, and that doesn't exist. It's just this big fragmented, and anyone who hasn't been in LA probably doesn't understand, but the city of LA is probably the most spread out metropolitan area, but probably in most places in the world. So we have millions and millions of people who live here, and the whole thing is spread out across like square miles, maybe 30.
I lost you. That one. Say that again. Sorry.
The whole city, I guess the county of Los Angeles is spread out across like 30 square miles. Like it's a massive expanse of concrete. Like downtown LA is a tiny, like almost microscopic part of LA. So there's still a bunch of different pockets of things happening, but it's not like, it was in the 80s or even 90s where the Sunset Strip was like the live music hub and everyone went there to see shows and stuff. But so as that changed and people were seeing me less, I was getting less calls, and I didn't adapt quickly enough. I didn't have other skill sets built up enough, like the mix engineering thing. At that point, I was just starting to get back into it, because I had my own band again at that point, and we were doing our own record, and ended up hiring an outside engineer to mix it. I won't name him because of how the story goes, but he's one of the bigger names in the industry. You've absolutely heard records he's mixed. He's phenomenally talented, great at what he does. For whatever reason, he did a really bad job mixing our record. It just sounded like he kind of just threw it in a template and sent it back to us. So even after doing like almost a dozen revisions per song, they still just weren't close to what they could have or should have sounded like. I've since remixed a couple of them just to make sure it wasn't that we were sending him trash tracks to start with. And no, he just really didn't care. So at the time that really pissed me off, but in hindsight, I actually kind of have to thank him for, forcing my hand to remind me why I got into music in the first place. And I wanted to learn how to make records. And well, I guess I have to figure out how to do this myself, because I can't trust other people to do it, even if they're great people whose work I respect and admire, because sometimes they're just not going to get it right. Even if they are really interested in the project, everyone's ears work differently, and you're never going to work as hard on your own success. Someone else is never going to work as hard on your own success as you will or should, and you can't really expect them to. So, so my my local work started slowing down. I was still doing tours, but I hadn't had a big touring gig for a while. I was touring with LP when she was signed to Warner Brothers back in, I think, 2016. So that's sort of when things started slowing down. The live scene started changing. I started getting less calls, and then by the time 2018 rolled around, I was getting very, very little local work, almost none. I was still doing session work, but not enough. I had one touring gig with a band that was doing shows in Mexico called Zodiac, who are great, still around. We're actually slowly putting out singles to our new stuff this year, which is cool. Watch out for that. Zodiac with a Z. But aside from that, I wasn't really working. So kind of at the end of 2018, I was like, well, I know I've been Matthew the bass player for the last 10 years, but now I guess I've got to start being Matthew the bass player and also Matthew the voiceover guy, or Matthew the personal trainer, or Matthew the something else, because music's not paying me enough money anymore. So I had a kind of early midlife identity crisis a couple years ago. But it was weird. As soon as I made peace with the idea of not having to play music professionally, obviously I was still going to do it because I love it, but something else was going to have to pay most of my bills. Kind of as soon as that happened, everything changed and I started getting calls again.
Oh, wow.
So not literally overnight, but kind of just about. In December of that year, after having just an atrociously bad financial year, I was finally like, okay, it's going to be all right. I'll do something else. And then in January, I was auditioning for the Diamante gig, and we spent 5 months on the road.
Yeah.
So
cool. Congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, I was, that was just, what's the phrase? Luck is when opportunity meets preparedness. Something like that. So I just happened to hang out with a bass buddy of mine who I hadn't seen in a number of years, Greg Cash, who used to play for Dorothy and some other really great bands. Josh Todd and the Conflict, awesome dude, crazy good bass player. And just called him up to have a gear hang. So we got together and brought some P basses and a bunch of distortion pedals and just made a crap load of noise for a while. And it was great. And then, a couple weeks later, got a call from him about this artist who'd called him about a short tour. It was like a 3-week tour in would have been March or April of last year, and he didn't really want to do it because he'd done the Dorothy thing and didn't want to get typecast as the guy who only played for female-fronted hard rock bands. So he suggested her to call me instead for the tour. And that in and of itself is actually a pretty funny story, because most of the tours that I've gotten hired for before, or at least some of them, I didn't actually audition for them. I was referred to them. The bass player couldn't do it, so I was called in as the sub, and in that situation, it's just assumed that you're going to show up and play all of the songs perfectly because you're a professional musician and that's what you do.
Yeah.
So I hadn't actually auditioned for a gig in, years and years. So the context of that conversation was she had called Greg about doing the tour. He said he couldn't do it or wasn't interested and she should call me. So the tour was mine if I wanted it. So cool. So I was basically just waiting for a message from their camp about, sending me songs and getting together for the first rehearsal and meeting the team, all that usual stuff. And instead, what I got was an email with probably like 30 other email addresses in it, inviting me to a cattle call audition. So not only was the gig not mine yet, but there were 25 other bass players that were also invited to try and get the gig. And on top of that, like 5 or 6 of those guys I'm really good friends with, and we hang out all the time. So it very quickly became a super funny like inside joke between all of us that we were gonna, well, cool, I guess I'll hang out and watch your audition and cheer for you like an idiot then. This is super funny. Because she didn't blind copy everyone on the email. They were all just like, all the emails were listed in there, so everyone could go through and see like, oh, I know that guy and I know that guy and I know that guy and that guy and that guy. Well, this is gonna be funny.
Yeah.
So that whole thing was pretty hilarious.
So what was the audition like? What do you have to do there?
You learned a couple songs, went in and played the songs with the band as it was, and at that point they were also auditioning guitar players. So the band was the drummer and at the time musical director Harley, who's still playing with the band, Harley DeWinter, awesome drummer. Check him out, hire him for drum stuff if you need him for drums, he's great. So yeah, that's the deal. And that was one of the best things about the education that I got at MI, because one of their classes was something called live performance workshop. And basically what it is preparing you exactly for what real world auditions are like, or at least real world auditions in LA. Because most of the time what would happen, especially for the label gigs, is you'd get called for an audition and you'd get sent, say 2 or 3 songs to learn. It's never more than that. Sometimes it's less. It might even just be 1. So you learn the song perfectly like the record, ideally, because that's what they want it to sound like. And then go into a rehearsal situation to perform the song, not rehearse the song, perform it, which is an important distinction that a lot of people don't understand, even at a live level. Just FYI, kids, if you go play a show, people do not want to see you rehearse your songs. They want to see you perform your songs. That's what they're there for. They're there for a show. So if you're there to just rehearse your songs with your buddies, you're doing it wrong. People aren't going to care. Perform your songs. They want to see that. Show up, perform the songs with, say, 4 other people that you've never played with or even met before, and have it sound exactly perfect and exactly like the record, and that's how you get the job. So that's what the class was at MI. There was like probably a dozen different categories, like modern rock, country, metal, pop, funk, some other stuff. And they just have a different song every week. So you pick the category you wanted for the song that you wanted to play. You learn the song, got assigned a time slot, and then got thrown up on stage with 3 or 4 other musicians you might have never even met before, and play the song perfectly and make it sound like the record. And if everyone did their job right, it sounds great. If one person did their job not so right, it might be a total train wreck. They'd even if it was really bad and like a true train wreck, the teachers would literally grab a music stand, flip it upside down like a broom, and broom you off the stage with it. And just wave their hands. Nope, get up, get out, get out. Nope, that's terrible. So it was a great way to prepare for what auditions are like, because sometimes you might even be the right guy for the job, but the gig might not be able to tell because whoever you were paired with, like if you were the perfect bass player for the gig, but you happen to audition with a drummer who just didn't learn the song properly, y'all are going to sound like crap still, and you're not going to get hired. And that's just kind of the luck of the draw.
Yeah. But when you played, they were just bass players, right? So just bass player audition. All the rest of the band was already safe.
No, the only person who was in the band at that point was the drummer. So
okay.
Yeah, so that's what made it more like that MI experience, because there was really only one guy who for sure was going to do everything right, and then everyone else was kind of a crapshoot. And the other funny thing was they invited like not even a quarter as many guitar players as they invited bass players. There were like 24 or 25 bass players there, and there were 6 guitar players. And they needed 2 guitar players and 1 bass player. So the ratios were a little bit off. You would have thought they'd so they ended up having some of the guitarists obviously play a lot more than once because they had way more bass players to actually get through.
Yeah. And for example, what did you take to that audition with you? Because I think that's also important.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, making the performance sound as close to the record as possible is what you want. That was another thing, kind of, that dovetails into the engineer aspect of being a musician that I didn't focus on enough at school. I was focusing only on really playing the instrument, not the tones that you get out of the instrument and how important that is to just being musical, but definitely to getting gigs as a player. Like if you're in a top 40 cover band, you don't have to make sure that the bass sounds exactly like the record on all the songs you play, because that's usually going to be impossible. But if you're doing like a Motown inspired thing, like if you got hired to sub in for Vintage Trouble or a band like that, and you brought a 6-string flame top Ken Smith bass with active electronics, you are fired. You are immediately, they're not even going to let you play. You are so fired because they already know it's not going to sound right, no matter what you do. So yeah, getting your sounds dialed in is just as important as playing the right parts and making the parts feel right, because that's part of what's going to make the parts feel right. If Steve Harris played the same kind of Fender P-Bass setup that James Jamerson did, it wouldn't sound like Iron Maiden.
No way.
So so for that audition, and for a lot of auditions that I've done, I just put together like a mini pedal board as a fly rig. I kind of started doing that as soon as I got hired to play with LP, just because we did a lot of fly dates. So if you're using, a backline you've never used in New York or Canada or whatever it is, it needs to sound right, and you can't put that on someone else. That's on you, because that is your job. So yeah, always bass and pedal board. The right bass and the right pedal board. You're allowed to take pedals on and off the board if your gig needs change. Don't, dark glass pedals are great, but if you're going to a jazz pop gig, you probably don't need them. Maybe you'll want an envelope filter instead.
Yeah. You're allowed to change.
You are allowed to. Yes, you are allowed to change. Yeah.
Yeah. But what did you take? Do you remember what did you take specifically to that?
Exactly what I took. Yeah, I brought my Dingwall. It was at that point it was the D-Bird bass. The D-Rock wasn't out yet, so I brought that, and I brought I think it was the X7, because I don't remember if the X Ultra was out yet. It was either the X7 or the XU for my main sound. And then what did I use? I used an MXR sub-octave fuzz as like an on-off effect for one of the songs, because one of the songs had just way more of a heavily distorted, fuzzy kind of sound that needed that extra layer of distortion. For a long time, I was really into layering multiple pedals to get a sound, like chaining 3 or 4 different dirt pedals in series, gain stage properly, so the signal isn't going to shit at any point, obviously. But that was really cool to me for a while, to see how you combine little bits of flavor from each pedal to create something big and unique and interesting. Sort of like if you would use multiple bass cabinets or multiple bass amps during a recording session. Similar kind of idea, because you're getting different flavors from different stuff. But yeah, for that, it was the Dingwall D-Bird for For the bass, one of the X pedals, either the X7 or the XU for the the main crunch sound, and then an MXR sub-octave fuzz for the extra super mean. Song starts with like a crazy mean sounding bass riff, and I have to stand up on a drum riser out in front and get my little 15 seconds of bass player son. So better make it sound good.
Yeah, gotta put the bass up front.
Yep.
Yeah. That MXR is the yellow one, right?
Yeah, it's like gold.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Got
Yeah.
it. You mentioned earlier, that in 2018, like you weren't getting any calls, and then they started coming in. How was the process, for example, in setting up your rates? And I don't mean like mention numbers, but how can someone price their services based on your experience? What would be your
right?
advice?
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, that's part of what I needed to learn. Because at that point, I'd been playing professionally for 10 years, kind of a long time, and once you've played that long, the standards of what you'll accept are considerably higher than what you'd accept when you first start gigging. Like when I first started gigging, I took some crap gigs for like $50 because you got to work. You got to, you have to meet people, build your name, and you need money. You're probably broke. So if you're not making money, you just got to kind of take anything that comes your way to a certain degree. And that's something that probably could have kept me working a little bit more when things got dry, but I didn't personally feel like slumming like that, either for ego reasons or whatever else. I felt like I'd earned and deserved a certain rate that was commensurate with my skills and experience, which in one perspective I did, because I should be getting paid that amount of money for my time, because I've spent that many years in the craft and have that level of expertise. But I don't know if you watch Gary Vee's stuff, but he talks about this kind of thing all the time, about how people come up with the excuse that they're not going to do that because my time's more valuable than that. But if no one's paying you right now, your time is not more valuable than that. And that's kind of a hard pill for a lot of people, myself included, to swallow when you're not getting a lot of work or working. So that's what my recommendation would be. Like, figure out what the base rate for that service is in your particular area. I'm sure it's probably different in Germany than it is in LA. I know for sure it's different in Nashville than it is in LA. Nashville gigs pay considerably less, but there are considerably more of them. So that's kind of the trade-off between Nashville and LA. And then from there, kind of decide how you want to price yourself based on your own personal network and experience, which are going to be the two most important factors of people hiring you. Like there may be dozens, hundreds of better or more qualified musicians in the area for a gig. But if you know the guy who's hiring and he likes you, you're getting hired, not those other people. So that would actually be my biggest recommendation if someone's wanting to know how to start working, or how to price their skills for when they're starting working. You just need to meet as many human beings as possible. You can't get hired if you're just a face on the internet and no one has met you in real life, or you're not even a face on the internet and you're just a monster player who plays in their room by themselves. No one knows you exist. They're not going to hire you. They can't hire you. So get out there and meet people, play as many shows as you can. Some of those are going to be not so great shows. You're probably not going to really care about the music that much, but that also doesn't matter. And that's also super important. Even if the music isn't great, even if the players and the band aren't great, nothing musically about it is like exciting or creatively fulfilling for you, or you're working for a rate that you feel like is far below what you deserve, you still have to show up exactly the same as if it was a major label gig and you're making a 6-figure salary playing for 20,000 people every night. Because if you don't, then you're going to develop a reputation as a guy who doesn't care. And then that's going to do the opposite of help you. People are
Yeah.
going to hear about you and how you just showed up and phoned it in on the gig and fucked up the chorus 3 times. And word travels fast, whether it's good or bad. So make sure people only have good stuff in their mouth to say about you, at least as far as it's in your control.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I heard you mention on that Neural DSP podcast, and I definitely agree with that. And I feel it's sometimes hard to do it, but I fully am with that position that no matter how many people are in the audience, you gotta deliver like your 100% because they paid not only with their money but with their time as well, and they're not getting that back.
Nope.
So you better go and murder that show.
Yeah, same gig every time. Whether you're a session musician or in an original band, it doesn't matter whether there are 5 people there or 5,000 people there. You go for it. It's 100% all the time, every time, because that's what the people paid to see. That's what the people deserve, and especially if you're in an original band, that's how you make super fans. People fucking remember if they were one of only 5 people in the club or the only person in the club aside from the bartender and the waitstaff, and the band showed up and just destroyed everything. People remember that. Not only do they remember that, but they tell all of their friends about this crazy, awesome new band that no one was even there, and they didn't even care. They tore that place up. Be that band. That's what you want to be.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. I remember I played, it was kind of like the other way around. I played this year, like before lockdown. I think it was in January or February. I played my first kind of like, it was like a tent party here in Germany. It was like a bunch of drunks, you
don't say.
Small little town. Yeah, small little town full of drunks. And we were playing like top 40 stuff, right? And I could have just gone like, nobody's listening to what I do anyway, right? But you gotta perform, and I enjoyed it. Even it was like crappy music in quotes. It was you play bass, you get paid for that. You're making music with your friends, like
life is good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's the section you definitely shouldn't be complaining about. You can bitch and whine when you're setting up your gear and tearing it down or driving through traffic or whatever dumb thing you want to complain about, but definitely don't be a whiny bitch when you're actually on stage getting to do the thing that you love to do. That's just lame, man.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. When you get, for example, hired to record for an artist, what is your approach to coming up with lines, with bass lines?
Great question. Sometimes there's going to be a demo part that's in there, either already played by someone or programmed by someone to kind of give you an idea of the feel that they're going for. Like I do replace a good amount of, this is obviously a MIDI bass part, so please play real bass in a similar style kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is also, here's the song. So sometimes it's just final drums and like a demo vocal and say acoustic guitars to cover the harmony part, and then you figure out the rest from there. So usually what I'm doing, I'll always listen to the song a couple times before I even pick up my bass, just to understand what it's doing, what all the different parts within the song are doing, kind of understand the dynamic flow of the song, because rarely are you going to get a song where you're playing a whole bunch of stuff right out of the gate, unless it's like a prog metal record and everyone's just going forte from beat 1. You might not even play the first 8 bars or 16, or kind of depends. So first thing is definitely listening to the arrangement overall, and then I'll pay the most attention to what the drummer and the vocalist are doing. I try and do the best job that I can to, be a bass player and bridge the gap between the rhythm section, which in its truest form is the drums, because they have no pitch, or not really a pitch that you understand as pitch. drummers who actually tune their drums to pitches that are relative to the key of the song, those are smart guys, and they also get hired a lot because their drums sound great. So drummers, if you're watching this, learn how to tune your drums properly. Everyone will love you more. But yeah, listening to the drums and listening to what the singer is doing, because in bridging the gap between the rhythm and the harmony and melody, I'm usually trying to add as much color to the song as I can, but without ever stepping on or distracting from the vocal. Because in pop singer songwriter, most genres really that aren't, and even honestly even rock, like no bass players aren't playing a bass solo in the middle of a rock song. They're not like playing a bunch of crazy chords high up on the neck when everyone's playing some fast 16th notes that require everyone to lock together as a unit. So it's still, most genres are like based around the singer. That's the song. That's what the audience is listening to. A lot of times people who love music, who truly love music, might not even understand what the bass is or what it even sounds like within the context of the song. Like I still have this distinct memory from when I started going to music school, and I'd listened to a bunch of the Beatles before, but had never learned any of their stuff. And it was interesting to find out that all of the stuff that I loved about punk rock was basically guys imitating Paul McCartney really, really fast. That's essentially what was happening. Paul McCartney plays with a bunch of melody, kind of like cornerstone melody parts of the songs. The songs wouldn't be the same without them. But I was playing some of that stuff for my dad on a break from school, and he was like, "Oh wow, that's the bass part? I never knew that."
Yeah.
So some people, even if they've heard it 1,000 times, if they can sing the part to you, they might not actually know that that's the bass. Actually, it's not just another guitar, folks. It's a bass. So yeah, listening is really the biggest takeaway in terms of knowing what the right thing to play is. I know you talked with Ian recently, right? Man, that dude is just he's so
killer.
Cool. When I grow up, I want to be as cool as Ian. Oh man,
he's amazing.
But that dude is the master of listening to the song and coming up with a musical, tasteful part that uses space and uses the right sounds, talking about getting the right sounds for the song. Man, that guy goes to the next level. He'll make his bass sound like a synth or an 808 or a 16th note sequencer, like all kinds of crazy stuff that you can actually do with your bass. So yeah, knowing what the right parts are to play, knowing what the right tones are for those parts, also super important. Knowing how your gear works so you can quickly and easily get those sounds. If you're working remotely, that's less important because you kind of have more time to, go through those growing pains by yourself and figure it out. But if you're in an actual recording studio situation with the artist and engineer, you kind of instantly need to be able to give them the right sounds and the right parts. Otherwise, they're probably not going to call you again. So in a situation like that, they'll send you the song beforehand. So you'll be able to come in with the parts and the sounds roughly prepared, and then maybe do some final tweaking on the spot once you get their input. But sometimes not. Sometimes you'll show up and play the song 3 times, and they'll go, "Awesome, have a great day." Ideally, if you're well prepared enough and you came up with the right parts for the song that sound right and feel right, it shouldn't actually take more than 2 or 3 takes to get the part. Kind of like in the old days when they still had to record the tape. There wasn't, you didn't get 1,000 takes. There was a limited amount. Yeah. Tape was like a physical thing that needed to be replaced and was really expensive. So if you're not only were you wasting people's time, but you were wasting people's literal money and resources because they were gonna run out of tape. You kids might not have heard that joke, but that's like my favorite digital recording joke. Can we do another take? Well, yeah, no, I guess we probably still have enough tape left. That's what that joke is. Because now you can record as many times as you want. Give it 100 tracks, play it for 100 hours, doesn't matter.
Yeah. I don't remember who I talked to recently who told me that most of the time they just take or I listened to another podcast. I don't remember, but it was like, first 2 takes, those are the golden ones. I can do a bunch more, but most of the time, the engineer ends up picking the first 2 anyway.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times what happens is I feel like you're in more of a flow state in those first couple takes, and they end up just feeling more natural. So even if you come up with like a better idea after playing those takes and listening down to it, the original one still just might feel better. It might have been Lee Sklar, actually. I remember hearing him giving an interview about how he doesn't even listen to the song before going into the studio. He just goes in, plays it like while reading it, and just plays the perfect crap every time within like 1 or 2 takes, and then goes home. Like that's how good that guy is. He didn't even need to prepare. He's just like, yeah, no, I got it. It's good.
Yeah. I think it was with it was the Bass Bottom podcast with Tim LaFave.
Okay.
He was recording with Bowie. I think I don't remember exactly, but it might have been that one.
Yeah, Tim's awesome.
Tim went to the studio with Bowie, and it was like just 2 takes, no punch ins, nothing, just save. Okay, go home.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, making music should be, or could be, I should say, that fun and that easy. Everyone's on the same page and shows up prepared and plays the right stuff, and it's great.
Yeah, but for example, for you, when you're listening to a song, are you like working on what did you play with your bass in your hands, or are you singing, or like listening, just ideas gathering in your head, or what's your process?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I'll listen down to the song at least once, just listening to it. I mean, sometimes again, if you're in that flow state, sometimes an idea is just going to jump out at you immediately. Like there have definitely been a couple recording situations where, especially for like a more melodic part or like a keystone element in the song that you definitely be able to sing back and recognize, sometimes you'll be listening down and just hear it there and know that that'll be the perfect part. So that does happen sometimes, but I would say that's probably the exception more than it's the rule. Like usually you're not instantly granted that moment of perfect inspiration. If that could happen every time, that would be awesome, but I still haven't figured out a way to make that be the case. So yeah, listening down, occasionally divine inspiration strikes like that. But if it doesn't, I'll listen down again and just map out what the harmony is. Because I should already have it in my head just from listening to it. That's another thing that's important for musicians. If you're not training your ears, it's going to be really difficult to execute ideas because you're probably not even going to be able to sing them. But if you're ideally, if you're hearing a chord progression, you might not know for sure what the chords are because you probably don't have perfect pitch. So someone won't be able to play an A and you'll go, oh, that's an A. But you should know it's a major chord.
Yeah.
And then that way, when you hear the rest of the context of the song, you can be like, okay, so that's a 1-5-6-4 chord progression. So then you just have to know what key it's in, but then you already know musically, contextually, the things that you're going to want to do that work with the harmonic structure of that, how to add chord tones that are leading to the harmony and supportive of the melody, all those kinds of things. So yeah, training your ears is super important, which is partly why it's a good reason to learn your favorite music and figure out what they're doing. Don't use tabs. Use your ears. Figure it out with your ears and your hands. That way you'll actually musically understand what they're doing instead of just reading it off a piece of paper and not really having any context for it. That would be like reading a book without actually understanding what the book is about. Like you could say the words, but if you don't know what the sentences mean, there's kind of no point, right?
Yeah. That's actually what I extremely regret about starting to play bass, because when I started to play, my cousins were already playing. He played guitar, and I had other friends who were already a bit more advanced, and they needed a bass player, right? They said, sure, learn these songs.
That's how it always is.
Like,
yeah. Okay, no one wants to be the bass player.
Yeah, and I had to like learn stuff fast, and they handed me tabs, and that definitely like, that has held me back because my ears are not as developed as they could be, even after going to music school and all that. If I can say anything to anyone listening to right now, take as long as you need, but learn it with your ears. It's just the best thing you can do.
100%, yeah. And especially because tab doesn't even have, there's not really even rhythm notation in a tab either. It's just a bunch of numbers. So it doesn't actually tell you anything about the music aside from some of the frets that you're probably going to want to be playing the notes on, but not how they arrive or what they feel like or none of that stuff. So, yeah. Skip it if you can. There's honestly, there's probably, if there's a song that you want to learn that you're really struggling with to learn by ear, I would bet you money there's a bass player playing it right on YouTube, and you can just watch his hands. You don't even need tabs. Just watch what the guy's doing, replicate it yourself. Eventually your ears and your hands will connect and you'll realize, these, even if you don't know technically in terms of theory what you're doing, you'll know that these shapes make these kinds of sounds and that sort of stuff. And then you'll kind of start connecting the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah. I find it hilarious when I see people like commenting on videos, when people playing covers, you see the person playing, and you can even slow it down now on YouTube. And they ask, do you have tabs for this?
No, of course I don't. Watch my hands, man.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, dude, just take a little bit of time and learn it.
Yeah, I don't even know how to relate that to the book analogy, because it's like, that would be like someone telling you what the book is about, and you're like, cool, can I have the Cliff Notes version? No, I just told you in detail, like the whole summary of the story, like the character's backstory and all the main plot points and how it ends. Like you don't need that.
Yeah, I don't know. What is I mean, especially right now, like a lot of people are stuck at home, are trying to get started to recording. First of all, what is your home recording setup right now, and what would you recommend to people to get started into recording at home and just the world of engineering and recording?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. Well, again, honestly, YouTube is an amazing resource right now. Like I wish it was as built out as it is now when I first started playing, because in some ways I probably could have skipped music school entirely. I know players, the singer and guitarist for Zodiac is a great example. He was actually a drummer in his original band, and he just decided that he wanted to sing and play guitar for his new band. So he just went on YouTube and figured out how to play guitar. He's a great rhythm guitar player now. Great songwriter. He doesn't know jack shit about theory, nothing. Has never gone to music school, none of that stuff. He just went to YouTube music school, and now he's great.
Yeah,
it's really just
awesome.
Really just about putting the hours in. So that's where I'd recommend starting. Like, if you have a question about kind of how to do anything, really, how do I change this part on my sink? Look it up on YouTube. There's a dude doing it. He'll show you how. Anything in the whole world you want to learn. How do I do this function in Premiere Pro video editor? It's on YouTube. I guarantee it. So start asking YouTube questions is the best, fastest, cheapest, most efficient, easiest way to learn. And to get starting recording, all you really need is some kind of interface. Even the really cheaper ones now, I think SSL just came out with a great one that's like $200 or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I started on the Universal Audio platform. I'm using their Aero now, just like you are too, actually, right?
Yeah. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. The Aero for me in particular is extra good just because it's bus powered. So for those of you who don't know, but most interfaces require you plugging them into a power outlet on the wall. But there are some interfaces that are actually powered through the cable connecting them to the computer itself. Those are bus powered interfaces. So if portability is really important, like you want to physically be recording guitar parts while you're taking the bus to and from your job for an hour every day, or the train, or whatever it is, you can actually do that with a bus-powered interface. Just bring your laptop and your interface and a guitar and make music right there on public transport. It's totally possible.
Yeah. maybe get a few coins in the way.
Yeah. So assuming there's no bums in the way or whoever else is on the. Hopefully the train is all right. Buses can get a little janky. I don't know, depending on the city that you live in. The city of LA buses are. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but it is possible. That's all I'm saying. Maybe not a great idea, but it is possible if you're that into creating music. So yeah, that's really all you need. You need your instrument. You need a quarter-inch cable that doesn't totally suck. You definitely don't need a bass-specific quarter-inch cable. If you guys are still buying monster bass cables because they're better for bass, they aren't, and they're probably also going to break your output jacks because they're measured wrong. Monster cables are measured in metric, not inches, so they're actually a little bit too thick, which is why they have such a great connection. So if you're leaving them plugged in to something for a long time and not plugging them in and out, it's fine. But if you actually plug them in and out of your bass all the time, your jack's probably going to break. So just a regular cable. It's fine. Regular cable. Pick an interface. Go ask YouTube, what's the best interface for under however much money you want to spend. They'll tell you. It's probably the SSL unit or one of the Focusrite boxes. That'll work perfectly fine. If you're on an Apple, you can get started on GarageBand for free. There's plenty of stuff in there to cut your teeth and learn how to start making sounds. It's obviously an upgradable platform into Logic, which is a fully functional, absolutely excellent professional recording platform. But you can kind of use anything you want. I wouldn't recommend starting with Pro Tools because it's the least user-friendly DAW to get around as far as like I just like to plug in my bass and record something real quick thing. That's not really the best for that. But there's no reason to not learn how to do it if you're interested in it later. People are still using Pro Tools a lot for a reason. There's lots of great tools in there that they have that other platforms don't have. I personally am almost always still using Cubase and mostly Logic. I'll use Pro Tools if that's how I get sent a session. Like if an artist sends me their Pro Tools session instead of just a stereo mix down of their track, that'll be easier for me to just record it in Pro Tools than going into Pro Tools and doing a bounce down and putting it somewhere else. It doesn't matter. But yeah, just learn, man. I mean, there's who came up with it? I think it was Malcolm Gladwell in a book called Outliers was talking about the 10,000 hour rule and how talent, for the most part, is not a thing that actually exists like by itself in a vacuum. Talent is something that's created. People aren't born almost ever being expert whatever the hell. They might be born with a certain proclivity for learning how to do it quickly and being adaptable to it, but skills are all learned. It's the best people in any field are only the best because they've spent at least 10,000 hours learning and doing the thing that they're doing. So whatever it is that you want to be or do, great athlete, great songwriter, great musician, great software coder, great video game, pick a thing, doesn't matter. The only way you're ever going to get great at it is if you put in a ton of hours learning how to do it. And part of that is you're going to suck at first. You're probably going to suck really bad. There's going to be a lot of moments where you look at yourself and like, this is terrible and I'm awful at it and I want to quit. Probably. But as long as you enjoy the process of learning, that's what's kept me in the music game for as long as it has. I was just always so excited when I'd learn something new about the bass or how to play it or how music harmony relates to itself and how the fretboard is entirely interconnected and it's just the same series of notes repeating in the same order in a slightly different shape with a slightly different timbre. As long as you're excited to learn and put in the work, I hate that I keep quoting Gary Vee on these things, but that guy knows what he's talking about. He talks about this all the time. Just enjoy the process, enjoy the grind, because that's what it is until you arrive, whenever that is. Someone can let me know when I've arrived. That would be great. But no, it's you're just learning. You're learning constantly. I'm still learning things every day about how to be a better bass player, a new way to look at the instrument, create a sound. learning new things as a recording engineer all the time. There's always someone to learn from. YouTube, Instagram, people are doing great, amazing stuff right now. So just get yourself a cheap interface, get an instrument that you like to play, watch a bunch of people doing stuff that you want to learn how to do the stuff. Start doing it.
Yeah, that's one thing. For example, I started learning about recording and stuff like probably 3 years ago, and at the beginning I was like super overwhelmed because I heard like my producer friends talking about, I don't know, side chains and the compressors here and the bass, and you had to send the kick to that way, and it was like, what? And you just have to like really baby step it. Okay,
yeah.
You open up a session, open up a track, and see, okay, what happens when I plug this and I press bus 1, and then you see what happens, and okay, I got it. And then you do it 1,000 times until that becomes familiar.
Yep, that's it for sure. Baby steps. Make noise until you make a noise that sounds good. Repeat.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. Definitely. Yeah. You guys don't need to worry about side chaining compressors until, well, maybe ever actually, but don't worry about that. Don't fall too deep into the Talkbase or Gear Sluts forum rabbit holes about all the stuff that you need to know. Just start creating stuff. That's the most important thing. Yeah. You don't need to spend your time talking about creating stuff. Just go do it.
Yeah, especially if you want to just, you want to record yourself on your bass. That's probably one of the easiest things. You just need to plug the bass into your interface or a DI box and hit record. And you don't need to worry about microphone positions. You don't need to worry about flipping the face or anything like that. It's just straight in, straight out. You gotta do a good performance.
Yeah, plug in, turn on a click, record yourself, listen to yourself.
Yeah. That's a great lesson. That's a great one.
Yeah, that was another great thing about school. We had a class where it was like basically a studio session setup where you'd come in, and in those classes it was actually having to read the song. So you hadn't heard it before coming in, and you got to listen down to it once and read through the chart, and then you had to play it just like you were coming into a session. So if you're not getting something that's at least usable, but hopefully nailing it within a couple takes, well, you've got some work to do, because that's the job. And then you get to take the recording home with you and like analyze what you're doing well, what you're doing not so well. So the more you can record yourself, especially to a click, because that's totally mandatory now. You shouldn't need a click to be able to play something that feels good. For sure. Don't use it as a crutch. But if you can't play something that feels good to a click, that's a problem.
Yeah, definitely. That's also one thing that, I practice with my laptop or pretty much exclusive with my laptop and an interface and click, maybe since, I don't know, like 12 years ago. And, when you start to play and you're practicing, and then you think you're like kicking ass, and then you hit record and you see like how much you're rushing and how much fret buzz sometimes you're getting, and you're not aware of that because you're focused on playing. And sometimes that is kind of hard at the beginning because you're like, okay, I thought I was actually good. and then and then you listen to yourself and it's like, oh, okay. But that's like the feedback to just, improve on those things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you want to stay in the moment while you're playing as much as possible, but especially in the beginning when your ears are new and everything isn't like super interconnected yet, it's difficult to be able to critically analyze yourself in the moment. Like after you've done it for a while, like now if I'm on a session and I play something that's not good, I'll stop and punch it real quick, because I'm not going to want to listen to it again later, because I already know that it wasn't good and I don't want to hear it again.
Yeah.
But,
sorry.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, but that was just again, thousands of hours of practice. I've just done that so much that even professionals occasionally play something that sounds like crap. They just are aware of it really quickly so they can get rid of it, so no one else ever has to hear them sounding like crap.
Yeah. I want to talk about one thing.
Yeah.
I think both of us, really like P basses.
Yes, sir.
How was that for you since the beginning?
No, Totally the opposite, actually. The first bass that I ever got myself was a jazz bass, and I was a jazz bass guy for a long time. I didn't even own a P bass until a couple years ago, actually. So even for actually, if you're talking chronologically, for the majority of my professional music playing career, I did not own a P bass. As crazy as that actually sounds to say out loud now, that's the truth. You can kind of get you can get sort of close to approximating the sound of a P bass if you solo the neck pickup on a jazz. It's not exactly the same. There's still going to be some noise in there potentially, especially if you're using any kind of gain, because it's obviously a single coil, so there's not any hum canceling function. But yeah, I feel like the P bass is one of those things where it doesn't necessarily sound like the coolest thing you've ever heard when you're just playing by yourself. So like if you're just plugged into like the amp in your room, or just plugged into a distortion pedal and are just listening to yourself on headphones with your interface, it might not sound super exciting or awesome or cool or whatever. But then when you put it in the context of a mix, it usually works pretty perfectly. And other basses can be a lot more difficult to actually sit in a mix that well, just because of how essentially what I think is happening is like the aperture of sound for a P bass is a little narrower. It kind of naturally has a little bit of high and low pass filtering on itself, essentially. So it stays out of the way of the kick drum a little bit easier by itself. It stays out of the way of the cymbals and like upper guitar and vocal resonances a little bit easier by itself without any extra stuff. Which is not to say that other basses aren't great, because obviously I own a different bass. I still have my jazz bass. I still have a Rickenbacker that I use occasionally. The Dingwalls obviously aren't P basses, although each of them can get a kind of P bass similar sound. But yeah, they just work. I can see why some people don't like them, because everyone has a P bass, and I get it. That was me for a number of years too. But eventually you'll come around. Eventually you're going to pick up a P bass and play it in the context of a band and go, "Oh man, I'm an idiot for not getting this until now. This is so freaking cool."
Yeah, to me it was. I started with a Yamaha RBX something. It was a PJ. And then I bought a Spectre, like a cheap one, like a very cheap one, like for $400 or something.
One of their Legend basses or something.
Yeah, one of those. I think even a lower one. I think it was like Performer or something like that. They're discontinued. And then I saved up, and I bought my Dingwall, my ABZ, which I had to sell because I got a tendonitis on my pinky. But then I got a jazz bass, an Exotic J. And I was like, "Oh, this is JB, so cool." But I was never like the sound in my head wasn't what I actually was hearing. And then I noticed that, from listening to, I don't know, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, and all those records, P basses. And then I was like, okay, yeah, I get it now. Did you play that and add some drive? It's like magic.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. And they're super utilitarian tools. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like when Leo made the original one, he didn't play. He wasn't a musician, actually. He didn't literally he didn't. There's old photos of him holding the bass. It is clear just from looking at that photo that man never played that instrument, not one note in his life. He was a craftsman. Yeah. So he made something that he knew worked for other people, and yeah, super utilitarian. You could beat on that thing with a hammer and it'll still sound fine. It might be a little out of tune, might be a little dented, but nothing's going to break. Chuck it out of a car, whatever, throw it across the stage, doesn't matter.
It's mojo.
There's a quick funny story to that vein. That band that I toured with in Mexico in 2018 a bit, Zodiac, we played part of our stage show ended up being a section where there was like a really long kind of like anthemic breakdown at the end of one of the songs. And the guitarist and I, not the singer, but the other guitarist, would jump over the barrier into the crowd and like mosh and pogo with everybody once once that breakdown really popped off, like kind of Rage Against the Machine style feel.
Yeah.
And for one particular show, there weren't any stairs in the front of the stage or like a way to easily get back up on stage with your instrument still on. So literally, because I had one of these Fender Mike Dirnt road-worn basses that's already visually like just totally beat up. Someone literally just like took a screwdriver to it and was like, cool, that looks like it's old now. Here you go. So once the song was over, I didn't want to run all the way around the back of the stage, taking like 30 or 60 seconds to finally get back up there. So literally, I just took my bass off and threw it, and then just climbed up on stage after it and picked it up, and it was still in tune.
That probably got you some new fans.
Oh yeah, no, everyone loved it. People went nuts. Even everyone else in the band was like, "Dude, are you all right?" I was like, "Yeah, it's a P bass. It's fine. It works."
Yeah, I mean, like for like relict instruments, like once they are already scratched, who cares? Yeah. But to me, when I have a new bass or new something, like the first dent is like to my soul.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, if that was a new spotless Dingwall, I wouldn't have even considered doing that. Because I mean, even that D-Bird that I brought to the Diamante audition, I distinctly remember when that got its first dent. First weekend that I had it, I played it at church. Yeah. I was wearing it in the green room. It was actually coming off stage to walk into the green room with it. That's what it was. And just took a corner a little bit too hard, and it just tapped the wall. Just like the littlest, babyest tap. And I was like, oh, that was weird. And I looked down, and there was a fucking paint chip on it. I was like, oh my, you've got to be kidding me, man. I waited literally 18 months for this thing, and I already chipped some paint. Oh God, what do I do now? Do I get some white out and like try and fill it in so I can't see it? What do I do?
I know what you mean. Yeah. I remember the first like major dent I did to my Super J, because I bought it used, so I had a couple of scratches, but nothing major. But I finished playing a show, get off stage, I put my bass on the guitar stand, I turn around, and I see with the corner of my eye the neck moving in slow motion, Matrix like, and hitting the edge of the stage. And it had a major day. The neck was fine, thank God. But I was pissed like the whole day after that. I was furious because it was my own fault as well.
Yeah, that'll take the jam right out of your donut. When something bad happens, and not only is it bad and dumb, but it was your bad and dumb.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, I mean, for those of you right now listening only, you can't see Matt. But Matt is jacked as hell. He's huge. And I've seen pictures on Facebook like a couple of years ago. You mentioned earlier that you were like skinny fat. And
so I was always skinny in high school, like super skinny. I weighed like 165 probably, 165, 170. Ran track. Was never particularly good at it, but I wasn't terrible either. I was always just JV, never a varsity track runner. And then I kind of just let that ride through college. If you were listening to the earlier part of the interview, you heard me talking about how much I enjoyed marijuana and bass in conjunction with each other. That wasn't super conducive to exercising or eating right or taking care of yourself in really any way. Frequently for dinner, you guys probably don't even have these over here, but our grocery stores for a long time had these packs of sugar cookies, like really soft sugar cookies with like a super thick layer of pink frosting on top. They'd come in packs of like 6 or 8. That's what I'd have for dinner. Treated my body like absolute dog shit for a while there. So after that, like basically around the time of music school, the end of music school, essentially, shortly after that, must have been when I first started realizing how terribly I'd let my body degrade. Because it turns out you can't take care of yourself pretty well for a while and then just not take care of yourself at all for 6 years and still expect to be in kind of good shape. It doesn't work that way. Who knew? Pretty weird, right? So yeah, after not exercising at all from say 2004 to 2010, probably, my now wife took me to a yoga class actually. And I was all right for the first half hour or so, and then for the last half hour, 45 minutes, I was dying, just suffering, borderline passing out, and all of these, 45-year-old ladies next to me are doing just fine. And I was like, oh fucking hell, I've got to fix this. That's not good. I can't be getting physically buried by soccer moms. That's not okay. So that's kind of what started to turn that around a bit. But I appreciate the compliment. I'm not nearly as jacked as I was last year. Gyms being closed, me being sad that I can't play live shows. My training hasn't been consistent at all.
But what did you do to build up, to bulk up to where you were or where you are now?
So now as big as I got up to about 220. So
how tall are you?
Was that?
How tall are you?
6'2".
Okay.
Yeah. So
I would have to look like really up because I'm a short.
Yeah, I'm not a small person. I usually forget how large I actually am until I see a photograph of myself around other people who I consider, I feel like most people like assume that everyone's about the same size as you are, right? Everyone's roughly the same size as you are, and then I'll see photos of myself with other people and go, "Oh, holy shit! I'm a full head taller than every other human in this photo. That's crazy." But yeah, to bulk up and get bigger, all you really need to do is eat, and in order to make that bulk muscle, you need to lift heavy stuff all the damn time. Mm-hmm. And by eat, I mean eat as many grams of protein a day as you weigh in pounds. That's essentially what it is. So for me, around 200 pounds, I'm trying to eat about 200 grams of protein a day, which might seem insane, but when you actually count it out, it's not that insane. That's sort of like having 3 chicken breasts a day and some ancillary stuff. So it's not actually that much, but making protein the focus of your meals, essentially. So like you're definitely not going to get big and jacked if your primary food sources are pizza and soda. It's just not possible. You can get big for sure, but you're not going to get jacked or shredded because your body just doesn't have the fuel to make the muscle. There's literally just not enough. Because basically what happens when you work out is you're creating micro tears in your muscle. You're actually physically damaging your body in a controlled way. Yeah. And then your body responds by realizing, oh shit, I need to get stronger. So it repairs that stuff and makes it bigger and stronger. Sort of like when you break a bone, that break in your bone actually is probably the strongest part of your bone now because your body recognized that was a weakness that it needed to shore up, so it made sure it was extra strong. So that's essentially what you're doing when you're working out. You're basically like creating a suit of armor for yourself that just grows really slowly over time. So you can go from, because I put on most of that weight. I was about, let's see, so at the end of 2018, like around October, I was weighing around 185. So I still hadn't really gotten super into, at least not powerlifting or like lifting heavy. I'd done a lot of working out, but it was more like HIIT style workouts, that kind of stuff, more athletic, explosive movement based or yoga. Which is also all great for you. But had never really, I hadn't bench lifted or deadlifted or squatted any of those things until fall of 2018.
Yeah.
So yeah, starting to do that stuff and eating enough protein and enough calories. Like if you're really trying to get bigger, you're usually spending your days being sick of eating. There were more than a couple days where I was still super short on protein before I had to go to bed, so I had to eat, literally swear to God, 2 pounds of Greek yogurt before I went to sleep. 2 pounds of non-fat Greek yogurt, obviously, because if you eat the regular version, that's going to be too much fat. But I still needed to eat another, 100 grams of protein before I went to bed. So I'd just be sitting on the couch, fucking cranky as shit, just eating protein because I knew that's what I wanted to do. So yeah, and that. I put on those 50 pounds of, mostly muscle, some fat, but mostly muscle in probably 6 months, something like that.
Wow.
Because by April of next year, that's about as big as big as and heavy as I ever got. And probably around now I'm probably 205. I haven't weighed myself in a while, but I guess that's what I am.
Yeah. And what I mean, I'm speaking from experience, at least in my circle and people I know. Like most musicians are probably not the most athletic persons out there, and with all the beer and drinking and partying and smoking. What can some of people out there do to stay at least a bit more active? And it might be, I don't know, home workout style at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just about making sure you create consistency. It's sort of like practicing your instrument, and in a lot of ways, it's very much the same. You have a goal that you're trying to get to, and the only way to get to that goal is put in the hours. And it's a little bit different for exercise because, like, you can play bass for 8 hours a day if you decide to. You cannot exercise for 8 hours a day. Your body will fucking fall apart. Like that just won't work at all. But an hour, I feel like everybody can and should exercise for at least that long. Maybe at least half an hour every day, but something consistently every day. So, I mean, as far as staying healthier, especially on the road, finding something that you like doing. Again, sort of similar with playing an instrument. Like if you don't like playing bass, you're not going to want to practice bass, and you're not going to get great at it because you don't like it. So why would you spend the time? So find some form of physical exercise that you like, whether it's yoga or HIIT style workouts like P90X or that kind of stuff, or heavy lifting. Powerlifting is super fun. I'll tell you, there's nothing quite like picking 500 pounds up off the ground. It's pretty cool.
I haven't done it myself, but I definitely enjoy deadlifting and squatting.
Yeah.
That's just, to me, it's like the perfect balance between doing all the music stuff and just, focusing on something else. And, you're, I don't know, squatting and you have all the weight in your back and you're only thinking, I have to pull this up or push this up because otherwise I'm squashed to the ground.
Yeah, literally kind of a do or die scenario.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's fun. Find something you like doing. Exercise is great for you. It keeps you younger, especially as a musician. Like playing music is actually pretty hard on your body to a certain degree. Like ideally, we treat ourselves the same as professional athletes. There's a reason they have trainers and physical therapists on staff because their soft tissue needs to get worked on all the time. So I've still got pretty bad tendonitis in both of my wrists, just from all those hours spent playing at school. I had the beginning onset of carpal tunnel in my right wrist for a while. I got acupuncture and a little bit of physical therapy, and now I'm able to keep it at bay with stretching and maintenance, essentially. But it's still there for sure. And all of that kind of stuff, exercise, yoga, all helps keeping your body functional. Because
that's interesting because that's something that not a lot of people talk about. You mentioned right now, wrist tendonitis. I got a mean pinky tendonitis when I was in my first year of music school. I couldn't play for 6 months.
Not really.
Yeah, and I know drummers. They all have low back pain from sitting in the drum chair or shoulder pain or something like that, and that's not really that much mentioned. Like when you talk to normal people, other people, you wouldn't think, he's actually playing in pain right now.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean that is one of the great benefits of exercise. Like if you don't use it, you lose it. Your body's a really adaptable machine, but if you're not giving it the stimulus, it's not going to be able to do the thing. So, like if you have back issues, say, is a good example. Drummers from sitting, lots of people who spend a lot of time sitting down have back pain. It's not because their back is damaged or injured. It's because their back is weak as shit. So just doing normal everyday things like picking up something off the floor or tripping while you're walking down a sidewalk. This used to happen to both of my parents. Their backs would go out. And what's essentially happening is the muscle is really weak. So it gets a shock of stimulus that it can't deal with. And so it seizes to try and protect itself and the rest of the surrounding structures in your body. So there isn't damage. So you're not actually hurt, like nothing's torn or broken, but you're in a tremendous amount of pain because you have this crazy muscle knot in your tissue now. But yeah, it's crazy. I remember that happening to my dad all the time when he was in his like 40s. My dad's almost 70 now. His back's been fine for a decade or more since he got back into exercising regularly, doing yoga, he doesn't even do heavy deadlifts. He just does like dumbbell Romanian deadlifts. But
yeah. You don't need to like, be a power lifter to stay in shape. You just need to, make sure that your spine, your core are stable so that you can do your normal functional stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times, for example, I've been super thankful that I, work out when I have to carry my gear from my home to the train station, and my train, I don't know, it's like I have to catch it like super fast and I have to sprint with, my base, a backpack, pedal board, something else, my cabinet, and just be able to farmer walk all that stuff to the train station and not die afterwards. It's so good.
Yeah, I mean that's the fun thing about building a strong machine to drive around the world in, is you can actually do stuff with it. If something heavy needs picking up, you don't need help. You can just pick up the fucking thing.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go to, before we wrap things up a little bit, because I have to catch a train tomorrow early.
Okay.
This is a rapid fire section. I don't know if you've heard the other episodes, but you gotta pick one or the other.
Okay.
Yeah. We all know you like P bases, so we're skipping that one. Passive or active bases?
Passive.
Solid state or tube amps?
Solid state.
Cool. Amp on stage or just DI and in-ears?
Both. Amp on stage that is the DI to my in-ears. The Bergantino Forte HP. That amp.
So amp with a cab plus DI out?
I mean, a cab can be cool, but if I had to pick one, it would be that amp's preamp DI out to in-ears. I mean, definitely in-ears, regardless of whether there's an amp on stage or not, ideally.
Yeah, cool. Clean or overdriven bass tone?
Oh, what a silly question. Overdrive all day long, man.
You'll be surprised. I've heard already clean ones. Rounds or flat wounds?
Rounds.
Nickel or steel?
Usually nickel. Depends on the bass, though. So some basses prefer steel strings.
What are you using for brand right now at the moment?
The parallel fret basses, I'm using the Dunlop Super Brights.
Yeah,
those are just awesome strings. They last forever. They sound great. They feel great. More importantly, I feel like, at least for me, a lot of bass strings are really stiff and rigid and non-musical feeling, and these are just really pliable and musical. If you want to do a full step and a half bend, go for it, man.
Yeah.
And then on the Dingwall basses, I'm using Payson strings.
Cool. I also got one set on my Super J now, of the medium ones.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Yeah, similar sort of things to say about Payson. Honestly, his strings are a little stiffer, but it works well with that scale length. And same kind of stuff. His nickel strings probably last longer than any nickel strings I've ever used, and I think I've used everything that exists. As far as I'm aware, I think I've tried at least every major string brand. I've absolutely used all of them.
Yeah. I just murder strings. When somebody asks me, how long do they last? And I'm like, dude, I kill them in one day.
Yep, I was gonna say a day. Yeah, literally So when I go on tour, having fresh strings is probably the biggest challenge, because I'm not at a level enough where I've got a string deal that supplies me with an unlimited amount of free strings for the year. So if I'm going through a set of strings every show, and we have run of shows that's 60 shows, I'm not burning through 60 sets of strings. That's just impossible. So what I've actually taken to doing on the road is I'll bring a Tupperware container that I can like coil to about like the size that they would originally come in their packs. That's about the size of the Tupperware container, and fill that with denatured alcohol, like high concentration rubbing alcohol.
Yeah.
Let them sit overnight. Pretty much back to new. Like not 100% back to new, but that gets all of the sweat and the finger gunk and whatever else is making the strings dead. Because the same for me. The end of I'll put on a brand new set of strings, play one Diamante show, and at the end it sounds like I'm just farting on a rubber band. Like they're just gone.
Yeah, same here. Hate it. I'm so envious of people that, they think, I change my strings every 3 months. And I'm like, dude, I despise it right now.
I can't relate to that at all. Something about maybe I have sweatier hands, or like the pH of my hands is extra caustic, something. Because honestly, even if I'm not gigging, if I'm like on a recording session, I will bring multiple sets of strings to the recording session. Because sometimes I'll just burn through the whole set and call it 2 hours.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Fingers or pick?
Oh man. Well, if I have to pick one, I'll pick pick, because then I can still hold the pick here and use these other fingers. So I'm gonna cheat and say pick, because I can still use my fingers.
Fair enough. That's great. That's creative. Yeah. That's allowed. Yeah. 4 or 5 string bass?
4. I definitely like 5-string basses, but usually I feel like generally I'll play more musically and something that suits the song better if I'm using a 4-string bass. Whereas with a 5-string, I can focus more on like what are the coolest things that I can do with the instrument, because there's a considerably larger amount of notes that I have access to. So playing chords and that kind of stuff, I'm probably not going to do that on a 4-string, but on a 5-string, I definitely might.
Yeah. You prefer playing live or doing studio recordings?
Oh, that's an impossible question. Both, for sure. I feel like the biggest thing that I enjoy about doing this for work is the ability that you're given to create something every day. So whether that thing that you're creating is that live show and that experience for the fans, that interaction with the fans, like honestly, it's not really an exaggeration to say that live music probably saved my life when I was younger. Going to shows, yelling into a microphone in that punk band, like I was reasonably fucked up as a teenager, not a super happy guy, and that was the thing that I needed to keep me around. Yeah. So remembering that and wanting to give that same experience to the next generation of music fans coming up, that's one of the things that I really love about live music, creating that moment for them, for us, together. Everyone's doing it together. And then the studio, it's the same thing. You're creating something tangible that's going to outlive you.
Yeah.
I couldn't give that up either.
I feel you. Do you prefer playing clubs or open air gigs?
Oh man, yeah, they're both good for different reasons. I mean, there's not really anything quite like going onto a big stage and feeling the level of energy that comes with thousands of people gathered together, making noise about something, creating energy about something simultaneously like that. That's something unique that you can't get from playing a club gig. But conversely, they're farther away from you. So in some ways, it's a less visceral of an experience than what you would actually get playing a club show and literally being able to just scream in someone's face if you want to. So again, I'd say both.
Yeah. You gotta pick though.
Oh, no. I refuse the rules of this game, man. I'm picking both. This is 2020. I can do whatever I want.
Fair enough. What are your top 5 most influential albums of all time?
Oh my God, what an impossible question.
It's not your favorite albums, just the 5 albums that influenced you the most.
Yeah, it's still an impossible question. All right, well, I'll name a couple that were what got me interested in music as a fan and interested in playing bass as a player. So let's start there. No Control by Bad Religion. Everything Sucks by The Descendants. Self-titled album by Operation Ivy. Those were the first 3 albums that I ever bought. And I listened to those records so much, and especially the bass playing on the Descendants record, Everything Sucks. If you guys aren't familiar with that, haven't heard that stuff, Carl Alvarez is as good as it's ever going to get in that genre. He's so creative, plays things that are so far out of the box in terms of what a traditional bass player might play. So much melody, doing cool stuff like landing on the third at the beginning of the bar instead of the one. All that kinds of like super interesting, creative tension and release music. And then what else? Any of James Jamerson's playing, and any of Paul McCartney's playing, as in terms of like playing in a band as a session musician and a supportive musician to the song. I don't really think it gets much better than either of those guys either. They're still doing stuff that allows the instrument to speak really loudly. Like, you definitely know they're there. They're not just playing root 8 notes, but at the same time, you know what the vocal melody is too. Yeah,
definitely.
So yeah, if I had to pick only 5, I'll play by the rules this time, and I'll pick those 5.
Awesome, great. Where can people find you online?
Pretty easy. I am everywhere at Matthew the Bass Player. So you can find me on YouTube, Instagram. I don't do Twitch or Twitter or TikTok. I might eventually. Probably not, though. It took me forever even to get on Instagram. I've only been on Instagram for like 3 years, I think. Something like that. So yeah, Instagram is the easiest place to find me. That's where I post the most stuff and talk to the most people, probably. Facebook seems to kind of be sort of moving on its way out. That, and I still don't understand why is the Facebook audio compression algorithm so bad? Why is it so bad? I don't understand. They own Instagram too, and you'll post something on Instagram and it'll sound great. It'll sound fine. And then the same thing will post itself to Facebook and it'll just be ruined. It'll be destroyed.
Yeah. It's crushed.
And converted to mono. What are you doing, Mark? Come on. Get it together, Zuckerberg. I know you got the money. You just don't want it. Help us out. We don't get to tour. All we get to do this year is make music from our own houses. So please, Mark Zuckerberg,
make the audio.
Fix your audio algorithm. That would be great. I love you.
Yeah. Are you teaching or just recording?
I do a little bit of teaching, but not that much. For whatever reason, I've never had a ton of students over the years. I had more before the 2008 crash, but once that happened, it was sort of the same thing where like most people couldn't afford it at all anymore. The people that could afford it could only afford to pay a rate that I was like, well, I'd love to teach you, but I don't want to make $20 an hour. So no, I can't do that. So yeah, if people are interested in lessons, I am absolutely available, have time. I even do that while on tour, which is one of the great things about the internet being a teaching platform. Yeah. Kind of, again, anyone you want to learn something from, find them online. See if they give lessons. You want to learn how to sing from your favorite singer? They might just be willing to teach you. Reach out and ask.
Yeah, doesn't hurt.
No, yeah, definitely doesn't hurt.
Yeah, awesome. I'm gonna stop recording a bit, and then we can just talk for a few minutes, and then wrap it up. But thanks a lot for being here, Matt. Thank you guys for listening and for watching. And don't forget to check out Matthew the Bass Player on Instagram. Check out his Facebook and all the bands he plays in. There's going to be links in the description below for you to check that out. See you guys.
Cheers.
It was great finally talking to Matt after around 1.5 years that we've been chatting back and forth, especially because we share a bunch of common interests. And not only is he a cool dude, he's also an amazing bass player and musician. So if you need bass recordings, I can definitely recommend that you hit him up for some amazing bass sounds. Don't forget to follow Matt on Instagram and Facebook over at Matthew the Bass Player, as well as his voiceover acting page, The Voiceover Viking. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.